We apologize on behalf of Ruben Carenza, who cannot be with us. So will be a slight change to this workshop. I will proceed with the presentation on the consultative meeting with the victims, and then I shall hand over to Mr. Atman Ghazi to speak about the file of the revolution's martyrs and wounded, and then Mr. Almi Al-Khadri, and then Rida Barakati and Trudy, who will come to the podium to speak about the process of transitional justice. I will start with the consultative meetings carried out with the victims last month. We had an initial meeting through online because of the COVID-19 pandemic with different kinds of victims, and then we had consultative meetings at the regional level, and we took stock of their opinions, their expectations from transitional justice process. These meetings focused on four major topics. The first one is the revolution's martyrs and wounded. The second one is the dignity fund. And the third topic is the specialized criminal chambers. And the fourth topic is the reparation of the marginalized regions. The report is available and was sent to everyone present here. In these meetings, we came up with some recommendations to unify the victim organizations and those working on transition justice, to exert pressure on government through public protests and media and parliamentary pressure. The victims and the perpetrators should meet halfway in order to build a new system based on transition justice, to fund the fund through the ill-gotten assets, to really hold to account international institutions, and to create some cross-cutting ties between those who were aggrieved by the past dictatorship. First, I would like to invite Adel Ben Ghazi to entertain us about the file of the revolution's martyrs and wounded. Thank you for the invitation. This is an important topic and news which has not been widely covered by the media or politically or judicially. The file of the revolution's martyrs and wounded, as described by the law, is the thorny topic that remained and burning file without solutions. There are laws enshrined, but the problem is with the enforcement of these laws. This makes us wonder once again whether politics and politicians today have made a trade-off and a sort of transaction so that many files can be eliminated or left to collect dust in the drawers, just to talk about the revolution when the commemoration time comes on the 14th of January or on December 17th. Likewise, for the file of the transitional justice, we are advocating reconciliation before trial, and compensation is the least of the concerns of the victims, even though many of the victims have, of course, been pushed to oblivion, and that's why at the top of their demands, That's why at the top of the demands was the financial compensation. If we come back to the file of the revolutions, martyrs, and wounded, that the majority of the Tunisian people have turned their back to it. Just for the record, if it wasn't for that file, there couldn't be any meeting like this one or any talk about transitional justice. Now we are starting to forget these revolutions, martyrs, and wounded, and we are now really feeling very sorry for them because they are in a very bad situation. Of course, the revolution is still ongoing. So 14th of January 2011 is not the right date of the revolution. It could be the triggering date because the revolution has not achieved its goals. That is dignity, national dignity, and freedom and employment. We achieved freedom, but we are still first-year sophomore students about democracy and dignity. With regards to the revolutions, martyrs, and wounded, they have done about everything up to the 14th of January. They are not the ones who, of course, the economic situation is now worse. Some people would say that the past period under the dictatorship was better. We never say that. But the least we can do is to honor these victims and their families and the wounded who are still with us and who are still aching. And every day one of them passes away, and the last of whom was Tariq Dziri in 2020. I hear voices asking for apology from the President of the Republic. I also ask for apology. Apology to whom? Will he apologize to half of the revolutions, martyrs, and wounded quarter? Of course, the apology should be to all the victims. So far, we don't know who the apology will be for. We don't know the number. We had the final list, but we don't know the exact number. After 5 years of work on part of TDC, of course, the number is below expectations, but it's not the problem about quantity. In Syria and Libya, we have hundreds of thousands of wounded and tens of thousands of martyrs, but they never achieved anything. On this level, I'd like to remind why the list of the revolutions, martyrs, and wounded has not been registered in the official national official gazette. That's why I'm calling upon everyone to require that the list as it is. Of course, many people would feel that justice has not been served. They resorted to the administrative court to ask that their names be included in the list because they have not been included. And now they are at a deadlock, and they were misled by false information. So as soon as the list of the revolutions, martyrs, and wounded list is published on the National Official Gazette, then afterward we can ask the President of the Republic to make the official apology. And because he's the one who represents the state has been involved and implicated in clear wrongdoing against the Tunisian people. Tunisian people are still suffering. We would like to pay tribute to the relatives of the martyrs, special tribute to the wounded who are still aching and who are still suffering, and the scars are still there. I'm living very closely to the wounded. Some people who could be standing on their feet, now they are in wheelchairs. Some of the wounded have become addicted to medicines in order to relieve and ease their pain. Some of them even express death wishes. And despite that, if you ask them if you have to do it again, they say, we would do it. They are willing to undergo the same path. We feel responsible because we turned our backs on them. So I'm making here a call upon the head of the government. The list of the victims is not his own property, it's the property of the Tunisian people. The dignity and we want the dignity to be restored to the wounded and to the martyrs. The list has been published and on has been published on the website of the Human Rights League more than a year ago, and it reached the head of the government more than 2 years ago. And it's a real shame on the state to turn its back on the relatives of the revolution's martyrs and wounded, because without whom the history of Tunisia would have taken a downturn. We want for the first time to see history written correctly. Unfortunately, many people sacrificed with their own blood to get the militants to leave the country. And there's one who considers himself as the supreme leader, who says that, and he erases the past history of the sacrifice, and he would proclaim himself as the sole leader. And therefore, we can never forget the sacrifice of the martyrs and the injured. If I can ask you some questions in this workshop, developing this advocacy strategy. This strategy is about developing advocacy strategies on reparations for the victims, the leverage and lobbying and different kinds of strategy. What do you think fit among these strategies to be advocated? I'm a bit embarrassed. I kind of feel that the process is going towards impunity, and those who perpetrated crimes may repeat those crimes. Those who there were bullets fired and shots fired in Tele and many areas, and these people who shot these, those who fired these guns are not held to account, and they can repeat. What I fear most is that the Dignity Fund is maybe it's going to be given up. That's my biggest fear, because the utility of reparation is now withering away from the minds of the victims. I want to guarantee for my children not to undergo injustice, not to be tortured, and to avoid what has happened to others. This non-repetition can only be through holding the perpetrators to account. But what we have now in Tunisia is impunity. Those who perpetrate crimes are not held to account. Now, if we had brought them to justice, we would absolutely have had a country with less corruption and with less crimes, and that would have made Tunisia even better. With regards to the question you've raised in terms of the proposal about the strategies for people to obtain the reparation they are entitled to, but they should not be just silenced by small compensations. With regard to the initiative of the Speaker of the House, I would like to say that's shame on him. I'd like to ask the Speaker, can't you find any human rights activists, any competent people who can take care of the case of transitional justice? You are inviting the opponent, appointing the opponent. If you want to reform on your own, reform for yourself. Now I have to know who killed my brother and who raped my wife in my presence. That's what I want. I want that person to be brought in front of me and that person to acknowledge and ask for forgiveness. And then I would decide to forgive or not to forgive. Nobody can, forgive on behalf of others. So don't give them a little money just to silence them. Money is the least of the concern, even though it's important, because it's all part of reparation, because these people who are deprived of a decent life, they spend most of their life in prison. Some were living abroad as fugitives, but what we insist on is dignity in the first place. Thank you, Mr. Adel. I now hand over to the floor. Mr. Ahmed would like to speak. The name of God, the most beneficent and most merciful. I'd like to thank Mr. Adel Ben Ghazi for his useful insights about the file of the revolution's martyrs and wounded, even though I may disagree about certain points he's raised. With regards to the date of the revolution, 16th of December and the 14th of January, this may be of interest to a category of people and not all Tunisians. 14th or 20th of January. That's not what matters most, because the people who are fed up with injustice and dictatorship, they came out of a dictatorship. It's true that the revolution was on 17th of December, but before that, there had been a lot of injustice that triggered that revolution. This revolution did not come from scratch, that people decided overnight to rise up against the regime. This regime has done a lot of wrongdoing and a lot of injustice towards the Tunisians. Many people thrived on the former regime's abuses, and they are now trying to disrupt the process of transitional justice and even the process of justice as a whole in our country. Therefore, the date of the 17th of December or 14th of January is not important. It could be important to, set the reparation rates for those who have suffered on those dates. The reparation is not entitled to those who went to the streets on the 14th or were hit on the 17th of December, because the file of the Truth and Dignity Commission goes back to the regime of Bourguiba and Ben Ali, and that's how reparation covers these long periods. So we want, what is the core, what is the goal of transitional justice? Transitional justice is designed to avoid any chaotic situation. When we achieve reconciliation and provide reparation, people go about their life in a peaceful fashion, and people obtain rights, and therefore it's justice and respect would reign supreme. With regards to the date of the revolution, what about those who were hit on the 16th of December? That is one day before the 17th of December. So the struggle is not bound by time or place. He said that the most important thing is to honor these people. But financial compensation or financial reparation is also a kind of honoring, because people who are financially, badly off, you may honor that person by, for instance, to grant a name to a street bearing his name, or to set up a museum as a memorial, or you give me a name, but I'm unemployed, I'm hungry, and I'm suffering from poor health. Is the most important thing honoring? I don't think so. I think rehabilitation comes first, and then reparation. And therefore, we need to set the priorities. People have to really put bread on the table, have to deal with their health. And once that person is provided with health care, and that person is provided with decent standard of living, afterwards you can honor that person by granting his name to a street. With regards to the apology of the President of the Republic, not to the martyrs, revolutions, to the revolution's martyrs or injured. Of course, that goes without saying. He said, who is going to apologize to in the absence of a list? As a president, when he makes the apology, there's a formal document, official document, that states that the president has apologized. He's not going to stand up and say, I'm going to apologize to X or to Y. He's not going to be able to name 50,000 or so. The apology of the president will be general. I'm going to apologize to the entire victims whose dignity has been violated, physical, moral dignity. And therefore, as a supreme power in the country, I shall make an apology to all the victims. And yesterday, if you remember what I told you yesterday, the one whose name is there will obtain their rights. But I want to remind you what I said yesterday, when I said that if the authority is acting in good faith, it will settle the problem in a year's time. If they are acting in bad faith, you probably will wait for 10 of years without achieving anything, whether the names are on the list or not. We want the state to really set a threshold. We can act by the force of law when you advocate your right by virtue of the law. Of course, there's nothing to fear. People are hoping that the state will grant them their rights. Rights can be snatched, not granted, and therefore rights need to be snatched and not granted. We need, of course, to exhibit a high degree of patience and perseverance. The apology of the President of the Republic shall be general, covering all the victims. Maybe on the 10th of December is the Universal Day, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And the President of the Republic has many opportunities to apologize. The first one is 10th of December, and he can stand up, as mentioned yesterday. There have been lots of violations on that date, and the President of the Republic, he can go to the 9th of April Street and he can make an apology to all those whose dignity has been violated, not just those who have reparation decisions. The state shall apologize to all those who have undergone prejudice from the state. With regards to the Truth and Dignity Commission, how it will operate, Mr. Benghazi said the Human Rights and Fundamental Liberties Commission, the state is run by other institutions, but Tawfiq Bouderbella is the one who ran this commission that drew up the list of the revolution's martyrs and wounded. Tawfiq Bouderbella drew up a list. So, if you report to the administrative court and you have to really limit the state by a threshold, if I tell you to go to the court and manage yourself, then I'd like you to claim your rights in a clever way. When you bind the state with a time frame that in 1 year's time the administrative court shall hand down its decision, some people do not have their names on the list, but they benefit from the healthcare card, and they have a medical certificate establishing that they were shot and they have bullets in their body. I wonder whether decree number 97 issued by Fouad Mbaza, he set a deadline, actually, if I remember. We are all brothers and sisters. We are bound by the rule of law, and we have to make recourse to the appropriate institutions like the administrative court. And it will examine the cases that are lodged. And as your name is officially registered by TDC, if you deserve the status of the revolution's wounded, you will be granted your right without any problem.
If your name is not has not been put on the list and you did not get any job, some people have other decisions to reparation, and their names are not on the list of Bouderbella, and they don't have a card to travel or to enjoy health services. But he's not working. What shall he do? He's not recovered his work. Other people, it all depends. We have different types of people. Many people are published here. The names are published here. Other names are published in other places. Thank you. With regard, last point. With regard to reconciliation can be the first or the last thing to do. What does the law stipulate? You always need to go back to the law. You always need to go back to the law and its provisions and stipulations. The law stipulates that, first of all, you determine the list of victims. The list of victims. That's the first thing to do. Their names will be published in the official gazette of Tunisia. The Truth and Dignity Commission worked and then came out with some decisions for people. Others did not get any decision. And something else was published in the official gazette of Tunisia. The government has to work on this basis to repair or to provide reparation for the people who have been listed by the TDC as victims of the revolution. This did not take place. So the reparation programs did not take place. So the first thing is to establish the list. The list was established, and then its publishing in the official Gazette of Tunisia was done, and the opening of the Dignity Fund has not been done so far. So if you say that, why did you appoint Mr. Mohamed Al-Ghariani? Is it because of the lack of skilled people in Tunisia? Rashid Al-Ghanouchi, what did Rashid Al-Ghanouchi say? When he was interviewed on the TV, he said the reconciliation existed already before. During the revolution, they brought Fouad Mbaza, who was member of the RCD, and after Mbaza, Beji Qaid Sibsi was replaced him. And then, but you know, you have to remember that Al-Beji was Minister of the Interior under Bourguiba and worked with Ben Ali. And if you look at other parties like Abir Moussi, they used to work under the umbrella of the previous regimes. And now, so you think that the rights of the victims will be defended by Mr. Al-Ghariani. You have to bear in mind that the victims, once they receive, you know, once they receive a prosthesis, for example, in their leg, and you give them work, you may adopt for any approach. You know, you can, for example, give me name the street by name. For example, Ahmed Ghuzi. But Ahmed Ghuzi, you know, there are thousands of people who are called Ahmed Ghuzi. The reparation has to be physical and moral. You shot me. Allow me, please, so that people can understand. When I was standing and the police shot me, it's not the Home Ministry are bad people. No, but we mean that those who committed or perpetrated violations should be held responsible. And consequently, Mohamed Al-Ghariani says he said to have apologized, and he said, yes, Ghariani apologizes. Yes, thank you for what you did, and then you can have a position and give people's rights. He said, for example, I was ill-treated, and say, who did ill-treat you? But you have to obey the law. We are not going to stop a whole process because of the reconciliation process. We still have another session. We are going to talk about the transitional justice process in the name of God, the Clement and the Merciful. Actually, with regard to the list of the victims and martyrs during our movements and our demonstrations, we always say and reiterate that the non-publishing of a final list of the martyrs and the victims of the revolution after 10 years of the revolution, it's like there is those who govern this country are not serious, and the 6 governments have consecutive governments have not been serious when dealing with this file. When they tell you that we don't have a final list of the martyrs, it's like they don't acknowledge the revolution itself, and they do not acknowledge that there are victims and martyrs. When I speak about the martyrs, I do not confine the list to the people who went outside during the revolution. No, we have other martyrs since Ben Salah bin Yusuf until today, since 1956 until today. We have prisoners and martyrs of the mining basin, the Islamists from the left wing, from Arab nationalists. Tunisia flourishes with people who actually sacrificed their own blood for Tunisia of dignity. But unfortunately, and this is a pity, I think that Mr. Adel spoke about many points, so therefore I won't take too much of your time. However, today I would like the government to speed up the publishing of the list of the victims and martyrs of the revolution. What do I mean? It has to be a comprehensive list, the Boudrebelle list, and the names that are listed there, I do not discuss them. It is a list, and the Boudrebelle Commission or committee work it on the basis of certain data, So may they succeed in their proceedings. But there is a second list, the list of the Ministry of the Interior. Once the revolution sparked, there is also another list published by the third list published by the investigation committee, another one published by the Truth and Dignity Commission. And but I think we need to publish one list. Maybe we need to set up a committee. I had a meeting with Mr. Abdrazak Al-Kilani once he was appointed, and Mr. Abdrazak adopted the same methodology. He says we are going to invite specialists and experts to establish the list in the light of all the lists that have been published. He said equally that he was going to meet with Mr. Boudrebal, and apparently this took place. He's going to call upon other stakeholders to join in, and therefore we'd like the government to publish a list that of all the victims and the martyrs. With regard to the appointing of Mr. Abdrazak Al-Kilani as head of the committee, and he's entrusted with the revolution martyrs and victims and the victims of terrorism, etc. This is will lead, I think, to a feeling of frustration. You know, the families of the victims and martyrs, they have decisions of reparation. Everybody now has a reparation decision. I think we should change the name of this committee. And for Mr. Abdul Qadir Al-Kilani, he should have the prerogatives of dealing with the whole process of transitional justice, including the bread revolution, the events of the mine basin, etc. We do not want the victims to be divided and classified, etc. We want them to be considered together as one body. They are part and parcel of the transitional justice, and should be part of the transitional justice as a whole, and not it's classified and separated one group from the other. I will try not to take too much of your time. What Mr. Adel said, I agree with him. I think that the revolution is continuing. Now, we don't want to have a supreme combatant. Many people would like Bourguiba to come back, and they are treating him like a god because he lived in the era of Bourguiba. At that time, 90% of the Tunisian people were illiterate, but now we have educated people. Bourguiba made many mistakes. He tortured people. He called for presidency for life. So we don't want Bourguiba back, even if he had something positive, even if he liberated women and built a modern state, so-called modern state, and we have to bear testimony for that. But we don't want someone like Bourguiba anymore, and we want Bourguiba himself back. We would like something that we can develop. But Bourguiba will be part and parcel of the Tunisian history. The same thing applies to Ben Ali, the change leader, and we don't want somebody to rule us like the way he did. I think that the governor, anybody who's going to govern us, has to abide by the law and the freedom and the dignity of people. And this revolution, I think we have obtained from it only the freedom of speech. But nevertheless, this revolution must continue to ensure the preserving of the dignity of everybody, to uproot poverty, and part of dignity. People who have been ill-treated and treated unjustly. Transitional justice is one mechanism of achieving and implementing dignity in Tunisia, and the revolution has to go on and not stop. I agree with what Mr. Ahmed said with regard to what Mr. Adel said. The President of the Republic is going to apologize, but formally. But to whom he can apologize publicly? we do not wait because, there is lack of balance between the authorities now, and we as victims, we don't really have full time and would not have the necessary resources and moral, and, because of our ages, because of our diseases, we cannot be in the combating field all the time. So there is lack of balance between the authorities, and it all depends on your power and authority, be it political, social, or cultural. So the President of the Republic must present his public apologies. This will lead to a psychological impact, but then afterwards we can improve, we can widen the scope of our conditions to publish this list, and we need to exert pressure on the Prime Minister to publish this list. One last point I wish to mention, if you allow me to do so. We need to, we are weak, we have limited resources, and we don't want something to deter our attention, or to divert rather our attention. He said, for example, somebody yesterday said, we need a new law. But if you are going to use a new law or to act a new law, it will be used against you. Therefore, you shouldn't fling other doors open which will be used against you. The law which exists now, despite its shortcomings, has to be implemented and observed. Now, if we among ourselves who do not agree about this law and we said that this law now is obsolete and needs to be changed, we are flinging a door of oppositions against us, and it can only impact us negatively. So somebody else take the floor, and then we'll move on to the second session. Thank you very much. I wanted to clarify just 3 points. The first point concerns the final list. If I examine the list that was issued recently during the three governments, the problem is that we had so many committees, and if we had only one commission with the same members who have been working for 3 or 4 years. But now, I don't think that the list that we have are final now. The list was published by the Home Ministry. I think it includes 700 forged medical certificates. People who have not been shot at. They have brought medical certificates, and the closest to reality. The law has enabled us to do something. Let's take it rather than reject something and start something new. I don't think we need a new law. If you ask them for a new list, they will not publish a new list. With regard to public, official, formal apologies, this will concern the victims of the bread riot, or the mine basin, etc. It should involve everybody. It should be global and comprehensive. It should involve all the people who have been leading their fight, and they have been combating for a whole decade. I would like to remind you, and in particular Mr. Ahmed, the revolution cuts the bridge with the past, but if you bring back the past, it will be used against us. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Adel. Thank you. Now we are going to move to the next point. The specialized chambers. We're going to talk about the reparation for the marginalized region, and I would like to call upon the speakers to speak about this. Thank you. who's going to start? We'll start with transitional justice, therefore. It's a tremendous topic, and a lot of things can be said about it, but the same thing, it contains so many misleading topics. Transitional justice is a sentence that we need maybe to clarify and understand its strengths and its weak spots, and something that has been distorted. You know, it includes many measures and policies and procedures and plans which enable or facilitate a change from one situation of tyranny, of despotism, injustice and violation, and to a new situation, a situation of human rights, democracy, social justice, and human dignity and national dignity for the whole country. Now, transitional justice emerged after the Second World War. I'm not going to take too much of time. It has been implemented in many countries, such as Germany in the 70s, in Spain, in Portugal, in some countries of Latin America, in Africa, Asia, and recently, and in the framework of the conference that we have held with the ICTJ, the experts have spoken about experiences into which they took part in Peru, Philippines, Colombia, Brazil, and many other countries which have witnessed the process of transitional justice. As for Tunisia, transitional justice took place after the revolution, and immediately after the revolution, there were some attempts to set up committees and commissions to organize this process with the help of the marginalized regions and people, and in the framework of the law 53 of 2003, the new law was enacted, and thus it has become legalized, and it has a law that governs it. A law that led to the creation of the TDC, or Truth and Dignity Commission, it has a mandate, and with mandate will end up by publishing a comprehensive global report which will be presented to the three authorities, and in particular to the Prime Minister, who will be legally entrusted and liable and compelled to publish it in the official gazette of the Republic of Tunisia. And then he is liable legally and according to the Constitution to implement the decisions and the recommendations of the final report published by the Truth and Dignity Commission with a committee or with a parliamentary committee to follow up the implementation, and with the help of the representatives of the NGOs, and especially the coalitions of the supporting organizations and NGOs. So this is what took place. So we had the framework law, and the commission was set up, the TDC was set up, and right on the onset, you know, the work of the TDC was distorted, criticized, and on the one hand, we had the enemies of the revolution and the enemies of the Tunisian people and of Tunisia and the democracy. They started to disform and disfigure the work of the TDC. And on the other hand, the NGOs in Tunisia started to act. These NGOs will represent individuals and regions and victims to support the work of the TDC and the process of transitional justice. Here, I think we have succeeded in achieving something, and each party succeeded in doing something. So I will start with the opponents. The enemies of transitional justice succeeded to distort and to disfigure our work, and they rely in particular on the mass media, because according to what many people think, among the Tunisian people, and in particular among those who pretend to understand politics and those who understand democracy, and has managed to disfigure and to distort the principle and the law of transitional justice. But at the same time, we, the organization advocating this process, we succeeded to stand up against all the attempts seeking to impede our work and they attempted to blow up the process of transitional justice until December 2018, when the conference or the Congress, the TDC Commission Congress organized in order to present its final report. So the presenting of the final report proves, or is a tangible proof, that it has managed something, and it has managed to come out with this report, despite the enemies and despite all the opponent groups, be it inside or outside the TDC. We have managed equally in another point, which is the public hearings, because these public hearings have managed to clarify and to prove and to show the injustices and the violations in the country, and which took place since 1955 until the January Revolution. However, this report is very important, and then last year, the Yusuf Shahed refused by all means, unconstitutionally, he refused to accept the final report presented by the TDC, whereas he had, but legally, he has to abide. He has to abide by the law and is committed to receive the Truth and Dignity Commission report and to publish it in the official Gazette of Tunisia. So he rejected it, and after a long time, he received it, but he did not publish it. He received it because it was a period of election for personal, individual interests. To cut a long story short, where we equally succeeded and where all those who support the transitional justice succeeded, we managed to publish the report in the official Gazette of the Republic of Tunisia. So this was done last June, on the 24th of June, 2 days before the International Day against torture. And this, we have to pay tribute for this to the Minister of Human Rights at that time in the government of Farfar, who carried out a lot of activities, and the TDC continued its work and its activities to defend the report, and we're asking for its implementation with the help of the NGOs of Transitional Justice who did not cease to fight and to combat for the implementation of the recommendation. Mr. Ayashi has actually moved and acted seriously to publish the report. And finally, on the 24th of June, this report was published. 24th of June. So far, I think things are quite clear. Something else I wish to clarify before I give the floor to my other colleagues to enrich the debate. How we responded to disfiguring attempts, and I would like to call upon everybody from this podium. I'd like to call upon everybody to open a window in the computer, in Google, and you write the final report of the for the TDC. I think it's about 500 pages, and therefore I would like to ask people to read even the introduction or the abstract. Why? Because what is prevailing now is that Transitional Justice and the TDC or the Truth and Dignity Commission are victims who are requesting money, who are seeking to obtain money. This is the defamating idea which is prevailing among the Tunisians. People, no, but we're not talking about many procedures, measures in the economic and social life in order to ensure that we come out of a situation of tyranny and despotism to a society where dignity, freedom prevail. And you have a list of all these procedures. You'll find, for example, reforming the customs, reforming the education system, reforming the public sector. It's also how to recover the plundered assets, how, for example, to work on the debts. You will find also some chapters dealing with public freedom and individual freedom. It will deal equally with some economic aspects, and therefore this report deals with everything that concerns the life of the Tunisian people and of Tunisia, be it economic, social, political, and so on and so forth. Another clear word, the emblem of the revolution, freedom, social justice, and dignity, are detailed in each sector in the report itself. And people who claim to be revolutionary people and who stopped but here in this report we have the goals of the revolution. The goals of the revolution are detailed. That's why we have succeeded, and those people who were distorting the work that we did have failed. Before the revolution, certainly they were active, and during the revolution they were active, but unfortunately they failed to understand the post-revolution era and to express the wishes and the needs of the laymen of Tunisia. And that's by way of conclusion what I wanted to say. To cut a long story short, each of us must carry out his what we call self-criticism and must understand what we call social justice and transitional justice. Otherwise, as I said, it's a topic of controversy. Some people are for it, some people are against it. And unfortunately, the opponents have failed. And the Tunisian parliament is getting ready to discuss a law to protect the police. I don't say the law enforcement, but the police, despite their violations. So we are heading towards impunity. Impunity will become legalized and governed by law, whereas, unlike that, transitional justice, for the specialized chambers and courts, and here I would like to answer the Speaker of the Parliament, who said bluntly and impolitely and untruly, he said he says, for example, the perpetrators are exhausted because they are going forward and backward to the courts and back home. And it's not true. Only 10% of these people attended the courts, and the same court, as a matter of fact. They have not been going between various courts. You know, the special chambers have two types of files. It has a type of file which specializes in violation against individuals with regard to human rights, like torture, murder, etc. And it has other files which is violation against public assets and public money. These are the files that you are defending. You are defending the corrupt people, and he's defending the old mafia, and that's why you asked Mr. Gharani to work with you. And Mr. Gharani was legally in the committee, and 9th and 10th and 11th of January, there was a committee which was set up, a crisis committee, which was shooting people in Taylor, Gab, and Castrin, and Bouzaine, and other places. He was actually was part of the committee who decided the shooting of people, and legally he has to be sued. That's why we refuse him. You know, he may ask for forgiveness or not, but he's a criminal, and he must leave and leave his seat to someone who is skilled and to continue his work. Thank you.
Thank you for your good presentation. We now hand over to Mr. Abdelhamid Troudi to speak about the publishing of the Truth and Dignity Commission report. Microphone, please. Microphone, please. I'd like to renew my thanks and gratitude to the director of ICTJ Tunisia that granted the victims an opportunity to express their voices, and my thanks go out to everyone who's contributed to the holding of this workshop. In my presentation, I will talk about the process of transitional justice after publishing the TDC's final report. The process as a whole was born distorted, and it is still that way. When the TDC ended its mandate on the 31st of December 2018, why was the final report published on the 24th of June 2020? 2 years had passed, at the detriment of whom? At the detriment of the victims. When the establishment of the Dignity Fund in December 2018, now until 2020, it has not been enacted and activated. When Yusuf al-Shahid issued a procedural decree on the 28th of February 2018, this procedural decree for the establishment of the fund is still disrupted. That's why I said this process of transitional justice is at a standstill. So, the publication of the final report and the rule of Farfar, we pay tribute to this step, and the publication of the final report stood as a turning point, a positive turning point in the process of transitional justice. Reparation decisions that were granted to the victims of all, for all different cases, those who benefited from the general amnesty, the incidents, bread incidents, the revolution's martyrs, the freedom fighters, and Yusufis. Reparation decisions have now become more legally bound because, first of all, they were decisions handed down by virtue of the law. And the publication of the final report gave a new momentum for the victims, and now the state is now acknowledging that there is a process of transitional justice that has to be implemented. Therefore, the publication of the final report was one of the mechanisms that compelled the state of Tunisia, including all of its institutions, along with the Prime Ministry and the Parliament. They are by law and before the international community and before the victims, they are compelled and required to implement the recommendations. Now, the lax attitude is accounted for by the absence of any political will by the successive governments, with due respect of one of them who contributed to the publication of the final report. One of them also issued a procedural decree. Some have implemented the decree of the implementation, activated the implementation of the general amnesty. The first government under Hamad Ishbeli and the presidency of Fouad Mbaza, and back then the prime minister was Beji Qaid Sibsi. There was a decree for the general amnesty, even though I disagree in the way he managed the case, but I consider the man to be intelligent. When Fouad Mbaza and Beji Qaid Sibsi came up with the decree for the general amnesty, they are knowledgeable about politics. They know that after the revolution they cannot succeed in the management of the boiling situation unless they come up with initiatives to absorb the public anger. So the politicians who came afterwards, after Beji Qaid Sibsi, and who are transitioning from one government to another, haven't they understood the rule of the game until now? If you don't satisfy the victims, if you don't provide them with their rights, you will sooner or later will be confronted with a difficult situation. The dictatorship victims are like a big mountain waiting, a volcano waiting to erupt. Hisham Shishi, you are lucky because you have an opportunity, you have an appropriate platform, a final report that is published. You have a committee or a commission managing the fund. You have the head of the commission that was unjustifiably dismissed, and therefore you don't need any legal tool to open the Dignity Fund. You need a session with the Minister of Finance, because after publication of the report, the government has taken steps to implement the process and to implement the recommendations enshrined in the final report of TDC, that right holders obtain their rights. There are people, after the publication of the final report, who were not pleased with the outcome of the report. Many are against the process of transitional justice, were not happy with the publication of the report. They started to look for other initiatives in order to cancel the transitional justice law and come up with another law. They started to talk about reconciliation, and the media are now trying to discard the issue of reparation for the victims. They want to really advance reconciliation, apology from the president, and issues that are used for the window dressing. I want to address the victims, and I want to tell them to wake up. There's no initiative on part of the authority that displays its honesty, and therefore we will not listen to any one talking about the reconciliation advocated by Ghariani or by the parliament, unless the Dignity Fund has been opened. Why do we insist on opening the Dignity Fund? As victims, when we were imprisoned and tortured, if we were after money, if you were after positions, I'm personally a humble teacher, and I was imprisoned because I asked for my rights, because I spoke out against the dictatorship, because I wanted dignity before bread. Why did the Tunisian people forget these important slogans? We are now standing for the sake of the Tunisian people, for the achievement and fulfillment of the goals of the revolution. When we insist on the Dignity Fund and the recommendations enshrined in TDC's report, it's for the sake of the Tunisian people. If you have missed out on this idea, we are reminding you through our struggle. I'd like to say that if the government was serious, but if they are not willing to meet the needs of the public people who need work, who want to have a decent life, they want to move around without having any fears about crimes that could be perpetrated against their children. When someone would like to request a service, they should not be compelled to pay to bribe other people. So among the recommendations of the TDC report is to consecrate the process transitional justice and to purify and cleanse the institutional system of Tunisia from corruption. The head of the government needs to take the matter seriously. The Speaker of the House has to take things seriously. If the government was serious in its intention, why are we so far waiting for the government to present its perspective for the implementation of the outcome of transitional justice? There's another equally important point. This process is so disrupted, and for the victims, if you want to obtain your rights, you should not rely on the politicians. I heard some victims criticize the house of the speaker who has a transaction with the former Desturians, and regardless of political accounts, the discourse of the leaders of these files to really stay away from any attack on the reputation of people. Let them say what they want. Why do I have to create hostility with other people? Those who wish to work with us, they are most welcome. Those who want to help us from the state, they are welcome. If they don't want, we can compel them to implement the Constitution. The publication of the report is now finished, and implementation will come at a cost. If you want to succeed, you victims, come on the 10th of December to Al Qasba Square. If the fund has not been opened by then, you will notice that the government and the reluctant parties, those in power and those who are not, will come to the full realization of our power. We will stand united, and we will convey a very nice picture to the media, to the international organizations, and to the victims. There's no reason to really diverge. After the publication of the report, we are in a position of strength. What is weakening us is our division, the hesitation to defend our cause. You have reparation decisions, and you are sitting in your home waiting for someone to do the job on your behalf. You have struggled for the dignity of Tunisia. Now there is no dignity. People are being oppressed because they are claiming their rights. I denounce the police attack on the protesters yesterday. I condemn such police brutality, and as representatives of the dictatorship victims from the north to the south, we condemn any law enforcement move. There's no way to render this country a police-controlled country. There's no way to oppress and to violate the rights and to infringe the rights of the people. And therefore, we hold the president, the head of the government, and the speaker of the house all responsible for any violation to these freedoms. This is our position as representatives of the victims. For the Tunisian people, if you want to remain free and to live freely, you have to back up the victims. We shall continue and we shall stay the course. You can count on us, and we want everyone to stand firmly without any fear. The people are still standing, and in the near and the remote future there will be a revolution if need be. There can be no place if you don't respect the victims. We shall be the fuel of all battles, and thank you. Thank you, Mr. Abdelhamid. After we have discussed the situation after the publication of the report, I shall refer to Mr. Khadri to speak about the specialized criminal chambers. He has followed most of the cases and the hearings that were adjudicated. Thank you to all the attendees, and a special greeting to the victims who are following in all areas of the country. I'd like to pay tribute to the martyrs of the revolution who granted us with this opportunity to dwell on these topics that are of interest to our country in the first place, of interest to cutting ties with dictatorship. I shall pray on the soul of those who have died since Independence Day until today, the last of whom is my colleague Mohsen al-Mighri, who passed away last week, 8 days ago, maybe at the same timing as we speak. I shall kick off talking about the late Mohsen al-Mighri. He passed away to the upper heavens, but he's not obtained his rights. He's passed away with a request to meet at the commission of the revolution's martyrs at the parliament, but his request was not answered, and his request has been postponed. He passed away while his request for the Minister of Defense has not been responded and has not been answered. He passed away with, and I was as a military man, we went to the presidency and to the chief consultant to the President of the Republic dealing with the military security regarding the case of the military men waiting for the President of the Republic, the Supreme Commander of the Tunisian army, to pay attention to the numerous military cases unresolved. I seize this opportunity to pay tribute to the former President Mustafa Marzouki, who apologized to some of the cases like the Barak Sahel case, and who responded to settle some of the military cases. This is the situation as it is now. As an activist and a head of an association, I would like to pay tribute to all the militants, all those who staged sit-ins in Qasba demanding reparation. And I should not be reluctant to request reparation, because it is our entitlement, it is the right that is acknowledged by law. But as someone who focused on the specialized criminal chambers since their inception, we thought that this tool was going to really hold to account the alleged perpetrators. I'd like to pay tribute to the victims' position. None of the victims reacted to the perpetrators who had tortured them. And this should be given to their credit, because we firmly believe in the rule of law, in justice, and the rule of law. Unfortunately, the festivity and the celebration that we were expecting from the specialized criminal chambers is going very slowly and very slowly. I become so fond of the specialized criminal chambers because I believe they are part and parcel of reparation. I feel very comfortable when I attend the hearings and when the victims come to these proceedings to express their plights and ordeals, and when the perpetrator attends, even though they were not good enough to acknowledge the truth and to apologize. This left me with some you know, a bit at thirst, requesting for more through the Dignity Fund. The specialized criminal chambers started operating on the 29th of May 2018 as per the law of transitional justice to refer the many people for gross human rights violations that concern many cases, including the different political dynasties, starting from the Yusufids until 2013, the bread events, the Seliana buckshot. Also, there's a case at the specialized criminal chambers. These chambers started dealing with corruption cases to address the financial and the embezzlement of public funds. There are 204 cases for which 13 chambers were established nationwide, including Tunis, El Kef, Bizet, Gabes, Mednin, Kasrin, Nabul, Sfax, and 13 governorates. Each case would have the territorial jurisdiction of the violation. If the violation occurred in Kasrin, the wounded, the revolution's wounded, would go to the Kasrin tribunal and chamber. And likewise for the violations for the freedom fighters, like the late Mata, Kamel Matmati, who was tortured in Gabes. The territorial jurisdiction imposes the proceedings in Gabes, and the Mata Barakat, his case is in Kep. It was a celebration for the civil society. It was a big celebration for the strong pioneers of freedom. On the 29th of May, the case was adjudicated in Gabes. It was a moment of bliss. The cases began to be disrupted, and very clearly so. The judges and the judges dealing with these cases, they have never attended, they have never adjudicated any political rulings. So they've had a training in the field of transitional justice, and therefore we were very happy with the high level of judges. I'd like to seize this opportunity to commend all honest judges who are still up until today are still struggling to reform their institutions, and that is a noble goal, especially the judicial reform. Myself and my association, we consider that the specialized criminal chambers are the backbone of transitional justice. The real backbone of transitional justice, because it's about truth revealing, it's about judicial independence. Among the qualities of the judges required, they feel independent actually when adjudicating cases. Of course, despite the governmental instability, of course, this will further prompt judges to be independent. Truth-seeking also, and truth unveiling. When the victims come forward with their stories, and when the perpetrators, when they exhibit a high degree of responsibility, when they reveal the torture and come forward with the truth about what they have perpetrated, all of these aspects converge towards the bigger of these chambers, that is transitional justice. So we are monitoring most of the cases to the extent of our human ability, and financial ability. The rest of the victims' associations, I say it bluntly, if we had more financial support, we would even do much better in this regard about this one important pillar of transitional justice. We monitored many cases. We were assisted by Mr. Rida. We moved together to Gebis, to Qasrin, to El Kef, and we attended many of these hearings, and for the documentation. With limited resources, I'd like to thank Mr. Jalal bin Sha'ban. Unfortunately, he didn't know about the third day. He is absent. He, on his personal expenses, and because he's receiving just a very poor wage, he has never missed out on any opportunity to attend these proceedings using his camera, and he also reports on these proceedings and takes pictures and photographs. I'd like also to pay tribute to Najib bin Murad, who is our comrade in the specialized criminal chambers. He is very enthusiastic about the success of this important tool of transitional justice. Transitional justice is sustaining so many shortcomings, as is the case for many other processes. The first challenge was the judges, turnover and the reshuffle of the judges, and therefore some of these judges were moved from their position. Even though we contacted the Supreme Judicial Council as a coalition of transitional justice, and we drew their attention to maintain these judges, but this has not happened. I will come to the current status of of these specialized criminal chambers. Since February, since the outbreak of the pandemic, may God protect everyone from it. Since February until now, Tunisia is, in Tunis we are required to adjudicate 127 cases, more than 64%. I would like to pay tribute to the judges overseeing the specialized criminal chambers who are doing a great job. Especially these cases are quite sensitive, and there are many cases that were referred. They are working under pressure, and there are many mechanisms that are disrupting their work. In addition to the pandemic of the coronavirus, just 3 or 4 cases have been adjudicated in 2020. Why? Maybe because of the corona pandemic and the judges reshuffle that affected, that really dealt a serious blow to the proceedings of the specialized criminal chambers. I can tell you that all the 13 chambers, in all the specialized chambers, there's at least one judge who has been moved to work elsewhere. And whenever there's a transfer of a judge, that affects the proceedings of these criminal chambers, and it would be very hard to find a replacement judge. And even the replacement judge requires a training on transitional justice. Any consultant who attends the specialized criminal chambers without training, they cannot really, the Chief Justice cannot adjudicate the case, because that would really be detrimental to the credibility of the proceeding, because one of the judges in the panel is not trained, and therefore the Chief Justice is compelled with his advisors to postpone the case. About 30 or more, 30 second-degree judges were transferred, and that affected the 13 chambers which disrupted their proceedings. They were later replaced. We were happy, but we found out that many of them have never received any training. So that's why we are waiting for the training to be provided, in addition to the curfew and to the precautionary measures taken due to the pandemic. We would like to really pay tribute and to bless, to pray on the souls of the judges who died. I am following. Many of them have passed away, and many of them have been infected. I would say 10% have been infected by COVID-19. %10 of the judges have been infected. It's true that the Chief Justice of the specialized criminal chambers were not affected by the reshuffle, but they were not promoted. They reached the scale, if you like, the deadline for promotion, but never received promotion. That is not likely to really prompt them to work hard. These are some of the shortcomings that undermine the process of transitional justice. In addition to the initiatives of reconciliation and with the serious disruption of these chambers, we are really running into treacherous waters. Our requests for the 10th of December is a series of steps to fulfill the process of transitional justice, first by publishing the list of the revolution's martyrs and wounded. And I do concur with the Minister of Human Rights, Mr. Ayesh Hamami. We talked with him about this matter, and he said that he would publish the list and that he will annex the list because there are this list is subject to be challenged. Anyone who has any reservation, or if anyone who is in the list and you have any challenge to the presence of that person on the list, you could make recourse to the administrative court, provided that you do not exceed the 1-year period. To conclude, there is no way to undermine Law 53. There's no way to set it aside. If that law, and there's just not just one single initiative to amend the law, or there are two initiatives at the Parliament. The first one from the Coalition of Dignity, who want to add an article for a dual degree litigation, and we have the initiative on the president of the Destorian party, who would like to undermine the process as a whole. So quite frankly, this is an issue that we raise about dual degree litigation. Many human rights activists believe that the specialized criminal chambers have to proceed on an appellate level with regards to the proceedings. That's one of the reasons that lengthened the process and made our recourse to justice delayed. Now we have 2.5 years now on. We have not brought to justice one executioner. We don't even know the tombs in the cemetery of the martyrs. Many who have died and who were buried in the cemeteries and we don't know about their whereabouts. And with regard to the family of Mata Kamel Matmati, until now, the family does not have a clue where their loved one is buried. And you all know that some said that he was buried in concrete, but we insist that he was buried in concrete until otherwise established, because those Abdullah Khalil who denied this crime of burying this martyr in concrete, he's the Tunisian Khashoggi murderer. If you deny that this martyr was buried in concrete, let us know where he was exactly buried. Let the family have a closure. So any attempt to bypass or to undermine Law 53, we shall stand against that move firmly, and the litigation shall remain on a single level, that is at the trial level. This is a transitional justice. It happens only once in a lifetime of a country. So if need be, the Supreme Judicial Council and those in charge of the Ministry of Justice have to intervene. May God bless the soul of the revolution's martyrs, and thank you for listening. We shall now take a 10-minute break, and then we shall come back for discussion. And we will speak about the different mechanisms of pressure and leverage in order to support the reparation process in Tunisia. Thank you very much.